Good morning, Fight Bananas fam. How is everybody doing? Yours truly, Elle Dawson here. I'm joined with Johnathan Ramlakhan, and of course, the man of the hour, PFL play-by-play commentator, former PFL tournament winner, and former UFC legend, Sean O'Connell. How are you doing today, Sean?
Doing great. How are you guys?
We're awesome. We're awesome. I have to say, this is a pretty awesome moment for me. I've been a huge fan of yours for a long time. Just that era of MMA is when, like, 2010 to 13 is when I really started getting into the UFC. So just the weigh-ins, the exciting fights is a very iconic for me. It's definitely in my personal MMA Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's lovely of you to say. Sometimes I forget, that people might have actually watched me fight because it's been a while.
It has, but you're doing big things now. Obviously, we'll definitely get to the PFL 2025 tournament because that's coming up and just what starts next week, right?
Yeah.
So we're pumped to be there in Orlando with you guys again. But I definitely would love to. First of all, where are you joining us from right now?
I'm in Salt Lake City. I'm at home right now in my office where I still live in Salt Lake and occasionally train, not as often as I should.
That's what I was curious if you're still located in Utah. My family is actually out there in like Taylorsville area.
Oh, cool.
So,
yeah.
Not too far from you. And I kind of want to get your take on just MMA in Utah. It's never really like taken off, it seems like. And I was kind of wondering if you knew why that was. You were one of very few fighters out of that area that, got to one of these big shows. And I feel like Colorado right next door has a wealth of MMA. What was the disconnect with Utah?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was coming up, there was a pretty thriving scene. My coach, Jeremy Horn, had transplanted here. And, we would have guys come out to take advantage of the altitude. And, like, big name guys would come and do some camps here. I got to train very early in my career with Matt Hughes multiple times. And Robbie Lawler would come through. And Rich Franklin would come through. Joe Dirksen would be here all the time. And, the gym was really thriving. There were some young guys that were coming up, and I was happy to attach myself to that wagon. DeMarcus Johnson had a nice little run, and Steven Seiler and Court McGee and all these guys. Court's still fighting in the UFC, you know what I mean? And kind of that my generation of guys, there was multiple dudes who at least got their shot in the UFC. And then for whatever reason, it kind of fell off a little bit after that. And I don't know if it was because some of us aged out and the training environment wasn't as competitive anymore. I don't know if I do know one thing that happened is there was a guy who ran a promotion here named Will Farah, who was incredibly supportive of fighters and helped launch a lot of careers. And he unfortunately passed tragically. And that kind of took away one of the main kind of tentpole local promotions in Utah that has since been backfilled with some other shows that I think are starting to build momentum now. But I wish I had a better answer because the talent was here and I think still is here. And you got guys like Ramsey Nijum runs a really solid gym right now, and Horn is still training people. But I think a lot of it is the kids classes and the weekend warriors and the women's self-defense is what pays your bills. So it's hard to keep fighters who want to compete from moving to Vegas or moving to Denver or going to LA or San Diego or down to American Top Team. You know what I mean? So
yeah, we're very blessed that there are guys like Dan that are willing to lose money so that fighters have a place to train like that,
Yeah. And, I begrudge nobody having a successful business model, obviously. And I know that there's still some up and coming fighters who are very talented and very promising. And I hope that if and when they get their shot, they'll still represent Utah and they'll represent Salt Lake City and my home. But yeah, it's one of those things where us old guys will sit around after we roll at the gym one day and just be like, what happened? There was a time when we had like 3 or 4 dudes in the UFC at a time at least, and now there's one left, and he's old like me.
Yeah, it's crazy how those seasons kind of go. We had a really good question from SG, and then I'll pass the buck to you, Johnathan. Does Sean ever train with Jens Pulver, another obvious legend of the sport?
Yeah, I mean, I was a heavyweight back then, and Jens is obviously a small guy, so I never got to train directly with Jens. But Jens did come through in Utah, and then we had an opportunity a couple of times to go train in the Midwest with those guys. We jump on with Jeremy when he would take a trip out there or whatever. So I never got to train directly with Jens, but was in the same room as Jens, and obviously he was he was long established already in the sport by the time I got into it. So it was really, really cool to rub shoulders with some of those guys when I was brand new. I had no skill, and I was just trying to prove myself as being a tough kid. And it was really cool to be able to do some of that.
Now, as we continue to take a look back, let's take a look back at the PFL, right? Making that change to the tournament style. What are you going to miss about the season format that PFL really brought?
Well, I actually liked the margin for error that was built in because, well, first of all, I needed it in order to win my season, but also it's a true sports format. That's the way things work in the sports that I love and that I grew up playing and stuff. Like you can have a bad game in football and still win a championship. You can survive even a bad run of games in basketball and still win a championship. Now we're smack dab in the middle of March Madness, and obviously their format at the end of the year is single elimination, survive in advance, win and go home kind of a situation. But the other pro sports that I've grown to love and grew up playing, you can have a bad 10 minutes in that sport and it doesn't ruin your life. And unfortunately, that's how things have been in MMA for so long. So I liked the fact that we would have guys like myself, like Ray Cooper III, there's multiple champions who would have not such a great day, not such a great fight, and then they'd be able to bounce back and they'd be able to put it together and make a run through the season and the playoffs, which effectively were a tournament anyway. So I like that. But this is a more pure form of combat sport. This is the Olympic model. This is the March Madness model. The tournament is incredibly demanding from an execution standpoint. The schedule is not going to be as tough. I had to fight 5 times in 7 months. Wow. These guys have to fight 3 times in about that time span. But you can't have that bad day. You can't have that, as you guys know in MMA, you can't have a bad 15 seconds sometimes.
Yeah, anything can happen in a matter of moments. But I think that this year is very exciting to the fan base just because of all this talent that's poured into the tournament from the Bellator merger. And we're seeing guys for the first time in the tournament versus, 5-6 years ago. I always use this example. I know Dave's going to laugh at me from the green room, but we got to watch Chris Wade fight Bubba Jenkins 7 different times. Right. And I think we're finally in a season where there's a lot of fresh faces in this tournament, which is so exciting. So I want to hear from you, as somebody who's competed in the tournament and who knows all the fighters so well from the commentary side, which division is the most exciting to you with this new structure?
Well, I mean, welterweight has typically been a really, really competitive weight class for us in the PFL worldwide in MMA. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of really good guys. And I only had an opportunity to call just a few fights with some of that Bellator talent that came in last year. And there's a lot of them in this tournament. And we're going to start it off with a bang. The fact that we get Jason Jackson and Andrei Koreshkov fighting against one another, and that those two could be favorites on paper to win the whole thing. Only one of them gets to survive. Only one of them gets to advance. You know what I'm saying? Logan Storley last year, everyone came in. All the other fighters last year at welterweight, we were like, hey, it's going to be you versus who in the championship, you think? Logan Storley got 5 of the 10 answers that we were given. Everyone thought that he was the dude to beat. And then Shamil Musayev came in and just shocked everybody. So I love welterweight, and I love the talent we have at welterweight. I love that Berkamov's part of this. I love that Thad Gene's going to be part of this. So, yeah, I mean, you don't have to go far. Our first show is going to show you 170 pounds continues to be deep, not only in the PFL, but in the worldwide scene of mixed martial arts. And it might be the hardest tournament to win.
Now, with, like you said, some of the welterweight, right, there's 2 new weight classes being added with bantamweight and middleweight coming in. How does that excite you, seeing some more weight classes being integrated into the PFL?
Yeah, it's cool. Middleweight, we had middleweight the first couple of seasons or maybe just the first season in the PFL. And then when we added the women's weight classes, they dropped it in order to make room for Kayla Harrison to make her runs and some of that to happen. So now you've got 185 pounds back, and you guys know this. 185ers are crazy dangerous. You get this really awesome mix. There's going to be some big, powerful grapplers in there. You've got explosive strikers. Every one of those guys has good size, but most of the time with middleweights, you're not yet sacrificing cardio for power, which starts to happen at 205 and starts to happen at heavyweight, right? So middleweights are like the classic athlete, and you've got a couple of champs that have won in different weight classes that are now back fighting at an ideal weight for themselves. Impa Kasanganay should be a 185er. Now, he won at 205 pounds, but this is the weight class he belongs at. Sada Busi, same thing. Last time we saw Sada Busi fighting at 185 pounds, he didn't know how to grapple. He didn't know how to wrestle. He couldn't stay on his feet. Imagine what a problem he's going to be now that he's not giving up size at 205, that he's not killing himself to make 170 pounds, that he's actually where he's supposed to be weight-wise, and we're 5 years, 6 years after he last competed at 185 pounds, and he's been training at one of the best gyms in the world with the primary focus of rounding out his grappling. He already has great striking and wasn't going to lose any of that. So Sada Busi back at the weight he belongs is a reason enough for me to put 185 back in the tournament, and we've got it. It's pretty cool.
You spoke on them, dropping the 185 originally to make way for the women's divisions. We're seeing another bit of a hole here with the women's divisions this year with just women's flyweight, nothing else in the tournament. What is the PFL's plan with all these featherweights on the roster? Are they planning to open up 135, 145 next year? Are they going to release a lot of these fighters? What do you see happening with that division?
I'm not privy to all of those discussions. I think that we have plenty of talented fighters in that weight class, in those weight classes, to hopefully fill out a tournament maybe next year. Or if not, we've got some Champion Series cards to fill out, and you've got some women who are very well established and probably don't need to prove themselves through this tournament format. Hopefully we can get another Cyborg versus Bashako fight, something like that. I wish I could tell you. I wish I knew like the big picture plan with some of these really elite fighters that we have in those weight classes. But that's been, unfortunately, one of the tough things about women's mixed martial arts since it really hit the big scene, is that you've got these weight classes, you've got 3, 4, 5 at the very, very top, and then there's a drop off in competition to where it probably doesn't make a ton of sense to have a 7-1 or an 8-2 type fighter going up against Cyborg in a tournament. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you got to make some strategic decisions there. But I know that the PFL values, especially the champions, the championship pedigree women that we've got, and hopefully I get to call some of their fights sooner than later.
With that being said, do you expect that the PFL will continue the tournament long term, or perhaps move to more of a UFC type structure with all these fighters they do have on this roster, and us seeing, like you said, they're going to have these championship series fights coming up, but we're lacking a lot of these champs in the tournament. Do you expect to see them move that route in coming years?
I'm not sure. I think that developing this model, or further fleshing out this model where you have kind of that true sports format to establish your contenders, where PFL is very dedicated to making this a meritocracy and making it about, do you win and earn your place in championship fights? And that's where a tournament now can hopefully set us up for a situation where, your established belt holders, the guys kind of at the top of the mountain, are not looking down and seeing, well, who's the loudest mouth, who's the individual that's causing the most ruckus, and who's the one who's talking their way into a fight with me. It's who's winning their way into a fight with me by winning a tournament. And I think hopefully that's a model that we can stick with. We'll see how the fans respond to it. And the PFL has always been really reactive to, and really proactive, I should say, in making sure that the fans' voice and the fighters' voices are heard. So I hope we stick with a model that establishes contenders through merit rather than just popularity.
I think I really like that setup. I like how you're talking about them really focusing on the quality of the fights themselves rather than the characters in fighting. This is probably one of the most asked questions right now. The internet was in an absolute frenzy because my good friend Dakota decided to attend the UFC fights while she was just home, in London. And everybody wants to know what's going on with Dakota. I think you'll agree she's an absolute superstar. So I'm assuming you don't have more news than we already have, but of course the people need to know when are we going to see Dakota Ditcheva fight again?
I am like every one of the people out there watching and wondering, and like, I want to call a Dakota Ditcheva fight tomorrow. She is one of the biggest stars in the sport, in any weight class, in any organization, period. I mean, she accelerated her timeline, her rise to stardom, I think faster than the PFL maybe thought was going to happen, than the UFC would think was going to happen, than probably everyone outside of her family and maybe a couple of training partners knew she was capable of. I remember going into last year thinking like, okay, well, she's in this season with, monsters like Liz Carmouche and Tyler Santos, and is she going to be able to hang with those people? And now the question is any one of those people good enough to touch Dakota Ditcheva?
Right.
And the answer right now is no. So I don't know when we're going to see Dakota fight. I know that the PFL wants to make something happen for her as soon as possible. I know that she's eager to fight again, and I'm very eager to call a Dakota Ditcheva fight. She's already somehow in her career, very as early as she is in her career, she's already run into the problem that much more experienced and much more established stars have, where like, nobody wants to see John Jones fight anybody except Tom Aspinall. Nobody wants to see Francis Ngannou fight anybody except John Jones or maybe Reina Ferreira again. You know what I mean? You have to be fighting someone who's elite. You have to, when you're that caliber of fighter, what we want to see is you against your equal. And right now there's no equal for Dakota Ditcheva. So somebody's got to establish themselves, or we got to go out there and we have to find somebody who's been competing elsewhere, and we got to bring her to the PFL, and then I guess sacrifice her at the altar of Dakota.
Now, like you're saying, I mean, Dakota Ditcheva name value, right? That's really one of the biggest things when it comes to building a promotion. So how do you think this change with the season or with the tournament format and kind of moving forward with that will allow for new stars to be built as well?
Well, that's the thing, right? The sport is very, very fickle, and we're very strange in MMA where you want people whose names you recognize. And you almost want that more than you want great fights in some cases. You almost want that. Some fans want that more than they want best versus best. They want that familiarity sometimes. They want that, oh, I know who this is. Oh, I want somebody who talks a little bit of trash and somebody who gives me an emotional reason to get behind this thing. And this tournament format is going to allow for fighters to kind of put up or shut up, to prove themselves, to make it through a gauntlet of elite competition in a very, very short time. And then if you can win this tournament, stake your claim as, hey, now you should be putting me on the champion series. I should be fighting the very, very best in the world. I deserve to fight Francis Ngannou if I'm a heavyweight, or even a light heavyweight for that matter. I mean, if I were still fighting and I won a 205-pound tournament, my call out would be Francis Ngannou. I would say that's who I want. I will go up to heavyweight. I'm big enough. I'm strong enough. I'm scary enough. Let's do this. These fighters are going to have to make a case for themselves with their performances, because you can't just win 3 decisions and say like, oh, yep, I definitely have dominated, and that's why you should make me a star in the PFL and in the MMA world. The true sports format allows for you, it gives you a platform. If you're not a good talker, it allows for you to prove to people how good you are by just winning and advancing, winning and advancing. Give us some highlights to show the fans and tell us why you should be fighting Dakota Ditcheva, why you should be fighting the best in the world, why you should be fighting Francis Ngannou, why you deserve that shot and the economic windfall that comes from that and the popularity that comes from that. Well, the sport gets to decide, not some promoter and not somebody who's listening to the fan forums. It's the sport, and your wins are going to decide. And so the format allows for you, it gives you the opportunity to make something happen, but then it's up to you as a fighter.
Absolutely. And I think one of the funnels that we're seeing for those stars is the regional PFL, right? Middle East, North Africa, you have PFL Europe, and 2 champions are making their debut this year with Florim Zendeli, and then you got Ali Talib making it. How do you feel their performance will be this year, one? And also, how do you feel that will continue to be a large funnel, like with other athletes, Dakota Ditcheva, another person who will continue to go from regional and then dominate in the PFL regular?
Well, look, Dakota is the model, right? And as much pressure as we keep putting on Dakota by propping her up as the example, whether you're a man or a woman in the sport of mixed martial arts, you should be looking at what she did and what she has done, and you should model your career that way. She took the challenges that were placed in front of her, and she listened to the doubters and all the people that said, hey, you know, she's this little princess who came over from Europe and they didn't give her any tests. And she was like, okay, well, put the next one in front of me and watch me knock him down. And that's what Ali Taleb's got to do. That's what Florim Zendeli's got to do. I mean, you're not going to, anyone who emerges from a regional scene is not going to be an immediate favorite. It's not going to be an immediate betting favorite, immediate fan favorite, an immediate like, oh, obviously that's somebody to beat. But look at what we've seen in the PFL and what we've seen in the world of mixed martial arts. Fans forget that there's always a time. There was a time where nobody knew who Tom Aspinall was. There was a time where John Jones was fighting on undercards and was like a brand new young guy out of nowhere that we were just like, huh, who's this tall, lanky cat? You know what I mean? We got to watch that in the PFL. We got to watch Dakota Ditcheva go from being this unknown, to a global superstar who now everyone's just like, well, no one's good enough to fight her. What are we going to do? That happened in like 2 years. That can happen for Ali Taleb. That can happen for Florim Zendeli. That did happen last year for Shamil Musayev, who didn't come from one of our regional promotions. But Shamil Musayev came in and he's so soft-spoken. He's like kind of a smiley guy, you know. And I'm just like, oh, I wonder what his story is. And then you look at his record fighting in like ACB and fighting in some of these regional promotions in Eastern Europe and in Russia. And you're just like, huh, okay, he's got a KSW test here. Like he might be pretty decent. And what did he do? He just went and finished everybody, just smoked people. And now you ask a welterweight in the sport of mixed martial arts, do you want to fight Shamil Musayev? And most of them are going to be like, I don't know. Maybe give me someone who's like a little less dangerous and a little more well-known. Right. That's what this model in the PFL is established. We're going to get that guy coming out of Africa. We're going to get that guy coming out of the Middle East. We're going to get that guy coming out of Australia, Oceania. We're going to get it coming out of South America. It's the Champions League model where you build regional talents into global stars.
And it would be remiss if I didn't ask you the way too early predictions on some of these tournaments here. So let's start off with the women's flyweight 125. Who is your early prediction for that one?
Look, there's 2 ladies here that we talked about a lot last year as being the favorites. And I have no reason to think that they're not still in that category, especially now that Dakota Ditcheva is out of the field, right? Liz Carmouche is an ageless wonder who is still chasing greatness at 40 plus. And you're supposed to fall off. In the lighter weight classes, you're supposed to fall off. Female athletes are supposed to fall off when they get a little bit older. She has not as of yet. So Liz Carmouche is absolutely somebody to beat here. But also Taila Santos. She's crazy, crazy hungry for an opportunity to prove that what happened against Dakota was not the best representation of what she is as a mixed martial artist, that she actually would be a much more competitive fight, most outs. And so I think Taila Santos wants Dakota. I think she's got like the vision board, Dakota's face on a wall in the training room kind of thing. And I think that's going to be a very strong motivator for her. Plus, we know that she, at her best, is an elite competitor in the weight class. So I think that the odds-on favorite probably should be Taila, but don't sleep on Liz Carmouche because she ain't done yet.
Absolutely. We got to.
Been a unit, absolutely, and just a legend of the sport. This is a really good question. Sorry to interrupt you, Jake.
Yeah.
Johnathan, sorry. We have a question from Jake. Are some of these divisions stacked too heavily to one side of the bracket, like women's flyweight and others? We've seen this question a lot with women's flyweight, where they felt like that a lot of the favorites were stacked on one side of the bracket, and they were worried maybe they wouldn't see those favorites in the finals.
In the sport of mixed martial arts, you don't get to pick and choose your way to success. This is the main complaint that people should have with the matchmaking model, right? That, you don't actually get the fight you want to see until it's time for us to sell it on a pay-per-view at the end of the year. And the best laid plans don't actually come to fruition. Somebody gets upset, whatever, right? So in the world of mixed martial arts, you fight whoever's in front of you. You get what you get. You don't throw a fit. And that should be the case for fighters. That should be the case for fans. Because the bracket doesn't match the narrative you've got in your head or I've got in my head does not mean that we're not going to get the best fighter at the end to emerge. That fighter, whoever can beat the person in front of him, whether it's a really tough semifinal matchup or quarterfinal matchup, or the big tough test doesn't happen till the final, you got to beat all comers if you want to win a tournament. That's how it works in the Olympics. That's how it works in March Madness. That's how it's going to work in this PFL Global Tournament.
So I have one more question about PFL specifically. Before I told you I'm an old school fan, we gotta take it back to some old school Sean O'Connell fights. But we saw the poster for PFL Belfast come out, and it looked a little empty at first. It was just Paul Hughes. After seeing his opponent, and it's not Usman Nurmagomedov, do you have any speculation on when we might see that rematch? Because I think a lot of people would love to see it, considering how close the first fight was, and also just what the PFL plans to do with Usman.
Well, PFL wants to do with Usman what Usman is ready to have done. You know what I mean? Like, Paul wants to fight now and wants to fight in Belfast. And Usman Nurmagomedov, as a champion, rightfully is like, why would I go fight you on your turf? Like, I'm the champ. We're going to do this where I say and when I say, because he's the champ. And that's how champs kind of flex their muscle in this sport. And that gave Paul Hughes and gives Paul Hughes the option of like, okay, well, I will sit around and wait for when you decide that I'm ready to fight again, or I can go and I can compete. And certainly I can risk delaying some of my own momentum or maybe knocking myself out of that number one contender spot by losing. But Paul, he ain't scared of anything. And so he's going to stay active and he's going to navigate his career the way he wants to in this particular moment. And then for Usman, he's earned himself a little bit of rest and he's going to take advantage of it. And when he's ready, he will tell the PFL, all right, I want to fight again. And the likely next opponent for him is, of course, Paul Hughes the second time. And for Paul, he's just going to have to do that wherever the PFL and Usman decide. He's not going to get to do it on home soil in Belfast.
That is a bummer for me to hear because, of course, a lot of us wanted to see that fight in Ireland. But like I said, I know we only have a few more minutes left. I'm an old school Sean O'Connell fan. So back in the day, this, by the way, is my favorite of your weigh-in compilations was the Flowers for Irla Latifi, who also just seems like an awesome stand-up guy. But I have to know, when did the weigh-in gimmick start for you, and how did you come up with that idea, and which one was your favorite?
So it started like when I was still fighting on the local scene. I would kind of goof around at weigh-ins and poke fun at the idea that everyone was so serious and like trying to scare each other. It's like, dude, we're both professionals here. Like, our job, we're both getting paid money to climb into a cage and fight another grown man. Are we really going to scare one another, right? So I used to goof around at the local weigh-ins, and then at my UFC debut was a short notice fight against Ryan Jimmo. Rest in peace, Ryan Jimmo, who I had known from when we both tried out for the Ultimate Fighter, and he and I had become friends through that process. And he happened to be my first UFC opponent. So we're standing backstage, and Jeremy Horn, my coach, was just like, "Are you going to do something stupid like you always do?" And Jimmo was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "I don't know. I always try to like goof around at weigh-ins or something." And so he and his coach, I think it was Aaron Simpson, was there with him. And me and Jeremy were just sitting back there kind of chopping it up, waiting backstage. And I was like, "Okay, what should we do? Let's do something." He's like, "Well, should we get in like a fight?" I'm like, No. That's stupid. Like, let's do something funny. So we came up with the little, like, the drink toast, the wedding toast kind of thing. And after that, you got to keep doing it. You got to keep coming up with good ideas. And I always tell people that's the reason I retired, because I ran out of good ideas at the weigh-ins.
But then you had the pizza at PFL. Like, I feel like you've always got some more in your back pocket.
I could come up with more if somebody wanted to pay me enough money to come out of retirement, and it would have to be a lot of money. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with those things, and I think that it showed the fans my real personality, which is something that's should be a goal for everyone in the fight world. Like, let people know who you actually are by how you fight, and on the brief glimpses they get of you away from fighting, which for me was that goofiness at the weigh-ins. I think that the rock, paper, scissors in Australia against Anthony Parash was maybe my favorite, just because of his reaction to it. Yeah, he was just like, okay, we're doing this. All right. So yeah, they were all pretty good. The bubbles in Canada against Steve Bosse, he was a hater on the bubbles, man. He was not having any kind of fun with it, which I was like, dude, someone is blowing bubbles. You should at least be like trying to pop them. But yeah, I had fun with them.
That's awesome. If you got to run, I was going to say, I have one fan question I wanted to pull up from the live chat, and I was going to give Johnathan one more opportunity to ask you something. So just on this topic of, like, you said you got to show off your personality. And I think that's what, made me as a fan fall in love with you, and so many other fans fall in love with you, was that just a glimpse into who Sean O'Connell was. Christopher J asked a great question. You mentioned being a good talker and that it's more important than ever in our space. What is your advice to these fighters that kick ass in the cage yet flop on the mic?
Look, I flopped on the mic the couple of times that I had an opportunity when I was in the UFC. I did a poor job because I think it's hard to understand when you're putting so much time, effort, energy into being a great fighter, into being a great competitor, into being a winner. It's sometimes hard to understand in the moment, or even just in general, that that's not enough for some people, and it's not enough for some promotions. And if it's not part of your personality to be a good talker, how are you supposed to, like, magically become a good public speaker, or clever, or a jokester, or a good trash talker, or whatever? I mean, Tito Ortiz, look, everyone loves him. He's a legend in the sport. Like, Tito could barely put together sentences and somehow was talking trash, and now is just a meme with how silly some of that stuff was. But it works for him in the moment. Not everyone is wired that way. Not everyone is built that way. Sometimes there's a language barrier. My thing is, it should not be a requirement for you to be a star in the sport of mixed martial arts that you also talk trash, that you're also, like, if that's who you are, if that's part of what you do, if you're good at it. Connor was great at it. Chael Sonnen was great at it. Colby Covington's terrible at it. And people just, like, fall victim to that hype train because they don't have anything else to cling to, because they're not maybe actual fans of the sport and of the competition. I applaud guys and gals who take the mic and do a great job cutting their promo. I don't hate on people who don't, because your job is to win fights, and hopefully to win fights in an exciting fashion. My hope is that that's enough for fighters, and the rest is bonus material. So if you're not good at producing bonus material, I'm not going to judge you.
Very well spoken. Johnathan, did you have anything else for Sean?
No, that's it for us here. I think you've given us a lot, man. So we appreciate you for your time and taking a good amount of time for your day. Elle, close us out.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're really looking forward to it. Dave, who's hiding in the green room producing the show today, and I will both be in Orlando next week. I don't, Johnathan, are you going to roll through?
Of course I am.
Johnathan lives in Orlando, so I'm in like Coconut Creek, so I'm going to be up there. Deb will be up there. Johnathan will be up there. So we're really, really looking forward to seeing you and Tawny and everybody over at PFL and this awesome new tournament season. So once again, thank you for your time. Do you have anything to say to the people before you sign off?
Just make sure you tune in. We've got fights April 3rd, April 11th, April 18th, first weekend of May. The tournament's starting, and we're hitting the ground running, and it's going to be an awesome year in the PFL. And obviously, keep your eye out for all the announcements of what's coming for people like Dakota Ditcheva and our Champion Series plan and all that kind of stuff. It's an exciting time in the world of mixed martial arts, and it's an exciting time for the PFL. So thank you guys for having me. Make sure you come say hi in Orlando. Don't just be like lurking in the shadows. All right. I want to talk to you guys. I want to like get your feedback on the fights in real time and all that kind of stuff. So anyone who sees me anywhere, please come talk to me. I could talk PFL all day.
Love it. Love it. I'm pretty sure I shared an elevator with you in PFL Nashville, and I was just like, oh my God, that's so this time I'll say hi. Thank you, everybody in the comments, everybody that watched live. In just about an hour and 15 minutes, we will be live again for our Tuesday afternoon show. So tune in for that, guys, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.